Okay, Shabbat Shalom and welcome to United Israel World Union. This is our Sabbath morning scripture study. Thank you very much for joining us. We have about 3 weeks until Shavuot, Pentecost, until the festival, the unnamed festival, which I'll talk about at a later class. I did want to say this morning that because we're 3 weeks out from the festival of Shavuot, and a personal project, and because of a personal project that I'm working on, an in-depth study, let's just call it for the present time, I was shaping my class for a build-up towards Shavuot. So that's sort of what got me thinking about what I want to talk about today. Today's class is called The Testimony, a Classic Cover. The Testimony, a Classic Cover. Let me explain why I called it The Testimony, a Classic Cover. I'm using the term cover, so let me give you a little bit of background on that. Most of us have heard of what we call a cover song, when a version of a song is performed by someone other than the original artist. You've heard this phrase, right? We can all think of examples, and we also know that many of these cover songs just don't measure up to the original version. There are some songs that ought to be just left alone. There are some artists that just make it impossible to do a cover song because you're always thinking of that artist. They're that good. Like you can't have someone, I know people have different taste in music, but I happen to like the voice of Adele. Well, you can't hardly do Adele. I can't. Most of you can't either, probably. So, again, there are some that we ought to just leave alone. They are what they are. The most successful, I think, are those, and my class isn't on music today. I'm just building this up. Just work with me. But the idea is that the best, most successful cover songs are those that the new artist sort of owns. They make it their own. They take the original and they do things differently enough that they're not comparing with the original artist, right? Would you agree? I think most of you probably know what I'm talking about. But this class that I'm teaching today on the testimony was originally presented by Dr. James Tabor. Well, I've learned a lot, as many of you know. I always refer to James as my teacher, and so I don't ever set out to teach exactly what he taught. That would be ridiculous because I consider James to be the best Bible teacher there is. So I'm not going to put myself in that position, and I'm not going to put you through this. But I will say this, that quite often the things that I've learned from James in our 25 years as friends, they do come out in my teaching. And this particular subject is perhaps one of the most, let's see how to put it. I think it was so impactful to me when I first heard it and I first learned about it that it's made its way into my teaching quite a bit over the years. But I've never really sat down and said, I'm going to teach that class on the testimony. I'm going to do that today. So it's going to be different for a lot of reasons. But I'll just let you know that the original, let's call it the inspiration of the testimony, it did make its way into Restoring Abrahamic Faith in chapter 2 under the subject of the way. Now, I will say this. Over the years, because this has always been in my mind, I've taken the subject and I have made it my own. So I'm not going to sit down. This isn't me trying to do that class that James taught. First of all, because I don't remember it. It was more than 20 years ago probably when I heard it. I've not listened to it since, but I'm familiar with the concept, with the ideas. And so over the past few years, you've probably received a little bit of this here and there, but never to the degree that I'm going to present today. The testimony. We're going to talk about that. I think this is one of the most important points in the Torah. Now, I'm going to focus my version of the testimony to the Torah, almost exclusively. I'll make a couple of points outside of the Torah, but I'm really going to focus on the Torah, and I do have some new material that wasn't covered in that original class that I heard, nor was it covered in Restoring Abrahamic Faith. So, are you ready? You've heard the expression, I've quoted this quite a few times, speak where the Bible speaks, be silent where the Bible is silent, call Bible things by Bible names, and do Bible things in Bible ways. I like that as a basis for anything that I do. So when I talk about the testimony, I'm going to define the testimony for you by allowing the Bible to tell us what is the testimony. Now, there are a lot of ideas. I'm not interested in ideas that come from other sources. I only want to know what the Bible says. The Bible uses the phrase ha'edut, the testimony is generally the way it's translated. That is used in the Hebrew Bible 38 times. 38 times. It's very, very important. I'm not interested in what studies of the ancient Near East seem to put on top of this, because there are a lot of people who define the testimony based on what they learn of ancient covenants and cultures, and none of that is going to apply here. I'm going to let the Bible speak, and I'm going to share with you a message that I think is essential. It's bedrock. And again, I'm going to avoid outside text and ideas, because we have a tendency in biblical studies to conflate ideas, to make associations that are not supported by the text. Or as we bring ideas in and we think, oh, well, this is what they did in the ancient world, and so this fits the biblical narrative. Listen to me, that is not always the case. Sometimes it leads us to make leaps of faith and assumptions. We're going to avoid that altogether. So, if you are ready to begin, let's open our Bibles to the book of Exodus chapter 16 and verse 34. We're allowing the Bible to define what is the testimony. In chapter 16 of Exodus, verse 34, it said, "And as Jehovah commanded Moses, so Aaron laid it before the testimony to be kept." So whatever he's talking about, and I'll get into this, he's going to put it before the testimony. Now, one of the things that you need to know is that Exodus chapter 16 is out of order. It is not chronological. A lot of times we pick up our Bible and we think that the events are listed in the exact order in which they occurred. Exodus 16 is not that way. Exodus 16 incorporates material that carries us much further down. Let me give you an example. If you look at verse 35 of Exodus 16, it says, "And the children of Israel did eat the manna for 40 years. They haven't been in the wilderness 40 years yet. You see what I'm saying? It says they ate it for 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They did eat the manna until they came to the borders of the land of Canaan. Now an omer is a 10th part of an ephah." This particular story in Exodus chapter 16 is recounting, it's on the manna. What is it? What is chapter 16? Did you catch what I did there? What is it? Manna means what is it? It's an account of the manna, and it's looking forward until they get all the way. So the writer says, well, the children of Israel ate manna for 40 years. All right, I've made that point fairly clearly. This is retrospect, is what we call it. It's looking at a different time, basically. Now look down, I want to read Exodus chapter 27, please. Go with me, Exodus chapter 27. And I want to go to verse 20, Exodus 27, verse 20. And verse 20 and 21 are set off by white spaces, and it says, "And you shall command the children of Israel that they bring you pure olive oil, beaten for the light, to cause the lamp to burn always in the tent of meeting outside the veil which is before the testimony. Aaron and his sons shall order it from evening to morning before the Lord, before Jehovah. It shall be a statute forever to their generations on behalf of the children of Israel." What we're talking about, I want you to notice the careful note in there when it comes to location. You're in the tent of meeting, which in Hebrew is Ohel Moed, outside the veil, which is in Hebrew a peruchet. So they're outside the veil, and we're talking about the veil which is over or upon the edut, the testimony. So this is locating what we're talking about. Where is this testimony? Well, it's in the tent of meeting. It's outside the veil, which is over or upon the testimony, whatever the testimony is. Now look down at chapter 30, Exodus chapter 30. We're going to go through quite a few texts as we go through this material. Exodus 30, beginning in verse 34, again at the white space. "And Jehovah said unto Moses, Take to you sweet spices, storax, and oncha, and galbanum, sweet spices with pure frankincense. Of each shall there be a like weight, and you shall make it a perfume, a confection after the art of the perfumer, mingled with salt, pure and holy, and you shall beat some of it very small, and put it before the testimony in the tent of meeting, where I will meet with you, and it will be to you most holy." And it goes on to describe it a little bit further. But I want you to understand this composition is to be made, and then verse 36 says to put it before the edut, before the testimony in the tent. Right? So we get this, we're getting located. We're trying to find out what the testimony is. And look, I know a lot of you think I already know this. Well, I've found some new things. So stay with me here. So you're inside the tent. You're before the testimony. And this is where this will be kept. All right. Now look down at Leviticus chapter 16. Leviticus chapter 16. And verse 13, Leviticus 16 and verse 13. "And he shall put the incense upon the fire before Jehovah, that the cloud of incense may cover the covering that is upon the testimony, that he die not." All right, so in Exodus 16, we read that this incense that we just talked about in Exodus 30 is to be placed on the fire. And what that's going to do is it's going to create this smoke that will shield Aaron so he doesn't die. So this incense will be wafting through the air, and it's going to cover the cover which is over the edut, or the testimony. Now look at Numbers chapter 17. Numbers chapter 17 and verse 16. Now in an English Bible, it's going to be verse 4. The numbering is different in Numbers, let's say. Numbers chapter 17, verse 16, or verse 4 in the English. Now I'm just going to let you know the context here is there is a rebellion going on. You remember there is sort of an attempt to usurp the power of the priesthood. And so there is this challenge that's put forth to bring the leaders of the tribes are to bring forward their staff. You remember this? All right. Now look at verse 19 or verse 4 in the English. "And you shall lay them up, the staffs of these leaders, in the tent of meeting before the testimony where I will meet with you." So these rods are to be placed before, lifnai, before the testimony, where I meet with you. This is what Jehovah says. Now look down at verse 10 in the English, or verse 25 in the Hebrew. And Jehovah said to Moses, put Aaron's rod back before the testimony to be kept for a token against rebels, that there may be an end to the murmurings against me, that they die not. And Moses did so, as Jehovah commanded him, so he did. So the testimony, we know, is in the tent, and there is a veil. There's a veil as well. Now, interestingly enough, the veil is called or referred to as the veil of the testimony. Look with me to Leviticus chapter 24 and verse 3. Leviticus chapter 24 and verse 3. Here we read, outside the veil of the testimony in the tent of meeting. So you're in the Ohel, in the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, and you have this veil, which is called the veil of the testimony. All right, now go with me back to Numbers, and I want to read you something. By the way, this phrase, the tent of the testimony, is only found in Numbers. Only in Numbers, and it occurs 3 times. In Numbers chapter 17, Numbers 17, verse 22 in the Hebrew, verse 7 in English. And Moses laid up the rods before Jehovah in the tent of the testimony. All right, now look at the next verse. And it came to pass on the morrow, Moses went into the tent of the testimony, and behold, the rod of Aaron for the house of Levi had sprouted and brought forth buds. Now go down to Numbers chapter 18. So I want to go through quite a few texts as we build the case for what precisely is the testimony, what are the details that we need to know, and as you'll see, this becomes the absolute most important point in the Torah story about this sacred place. So it's very important that we understand that. People, I think they know what this is, but they're missing some details. And the only way to get the details is to go through these texts. So Numbers chapter 18 and verse 2. And your brethren also of the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, bring you near with thee, that they may be joined to thee and minister to thee, but you and your sons with thee shall minister before the tent of the testimony. So we've got whatever the testimony is. The testimony is a physical object. You can put things before it. You can screen it, and when you do so, the screen is referred to as the veil of the testimony, which is inside the Ohel, the tent, which is referred to as the tent of the testimony. So you get the idea. I'm starting to demonstrate that whatever this testimony is, it's so important that the things which are around it are there for the purpose of the testimony. There's a very close connection. Now, when I say tent and Ohel, you might be thinking of the Mishkan. The Mishkan. Go with me to Exodus chapter 25. Exodus chapter 25. And I want to read verse 8 and 9. We're now shifting to what is called the Mishkan. In chapter 25 of Exodus, and let them, verse 8, make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them according to all that I show you, the pattern of the Mishkan or the tabernacle, and the pattern of all its vessels, even so shall you make it. What God is telling Moses here is that he wants a holy place. The Hebrew word is mikdash. What is holy? So he wants a holy place. Make for me a holy place, because he wants to dwell in the midst of his people. Now, he says he's going to make what we call a mishkan, according to a pattern, in Hebrew it's tavnit, that was shown to him in the mount. Now we're going to go through some of the text associated with the mishkan. The mishkan, the tabernacle is the way it's typically translated, is referred to as the tabernacle of the testimony. So now we're expanding a little bit. Go with me to Exodus 38, Exodus chapter 38, and verse 21. Exodus 38 and verse 21. These are the accounts of the Mishkan, or the tabernacle of the testimony, as they were counted according to the commandment of Moses for the work of the Levites by the hand of Itamar the son of Aaron the priest. So he's getting into a section dealing with the accounts of the tabernacle, which is immediately qualified as, the tabernacle of the testimony. Look down at the book of Numbers, chapter 1. Numbers, chapter 1. And I want to look at verse 50. You shall appoint the Levites, Numbers 1:50. You shall appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of the testimony and over all its vessels and all the things that belong to it. So it's called the tabernacle of the testimony. Look at verse 53. But the Levites shall pitch around about the tabernacle of the testimony. You get the image? Look at chapter 10, Numbers chapter 10. And if you go to verse 11, and it came to pass on the 20th day of the second month in the second year that the cloud was taken up from off the tabernacle of the testimony. So I think we've established that. Now, when the tabernacle was erected, we get a little bit more information about this testimony, the Edut. I want you to go with me to the book of Exodus. And some of you are thinking, wow, why is he going from Exodus to Numbers? There's a method to the madness here. Stay with me. Go to Exodus chapter 40. Exodus 40. And I want to begin reading in verse 17. And it came to pass in the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle, the Mishkan, was erected. And Moses erected the tabernacle and fastened its sockets and set up its boards and put in its bars and reared up its pillars. And he spread the tent, the Ohel, over the tabernacle, the Mishkan. I know this is detailed, but stick with it. And put the covering of the tent above upon it as Jehovah commanded. And he took and put the testimony, this is what we're talking about here, into the ark. And set the poles on the ark and put the covering above upon the ark. And he brought the ark into the tabernacle and set up the veil of the screen and screened the ark of the testimony. So what we get here is that now we've got the Ohel, which is called the Ohel of the testimony. We've got the veil, which is called the veil of the testimony. And now even the tabernacle is referred to as the tabernacle of the testimony. Look at Exodus chapter 25. Exodus chapter 25 and verse 16. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I shall give you. So whatever this testimony is, it's going inside the aron, the ark as it's translated. Literally, it just means a box. He's going to put the testimony in the box. Look down at verse 21. And you shall put the covering above upon the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I will give you. So we're beginning to pick up a few things. Whatever this testimony is, it's something that God is giving to Moses. Moses is going to put it in the ark of the testimony, which will be behind the veil, which is called the veil of the testimony, which will be in the tabernacle of the testimony, surrounded by the ohel, the tent of the testimony. We still don't know, according to what I'm presenting in the order in which I'm presenting it, what exactly is the testimony. Go with me to Exodus 25. Look down at verse, let's read 21 and 22. And you shall put the covering above upon the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I will give you, and there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the covering, from between the two cherubim, which are upon the ark of the testimony of all the things which I will give you in commandments to the children of Israel. Jehovah is going to meet with Moses at the testimony. This is where this communication will take place. And notice the ark is known as, it's really, literally, you could just say it like this, the box of the testimony. It's the box that you put the testimony in. Now that doesn't sound as cool because we're used to hearing the ark of the testimony. But it's really a box. I'm going to meet you at the box of the testimony. Look down at Exodus 26. Exodus 26 and verse 33. And you shall hang up the veil under the clasp, that you may bring in there within the veil the ark of the testimony, and the veil shall be for you as a division between the holy place and the most holy. And you shall put the covering upon the ark of the testimony in the most holy place. Now one other, look at Exodus chapter 30. Exodus 30 and verse 6. You shall put it before the veil that is by the ark of the testimony, before the covering that is over the testimony, where I will meet with you. So you get this idea. The testimony is something physical. Things can be placed before it. Things can screen it. Things can be over it, around it. It's the place where God will meet and communicate His intentions to Moses. It's placed in a tent, which is then called the tent of the Adut. It's inside the Mishkan, or the tabernacle, which is referred to as the tabernacle of the testimony. The Adut is placed in a box, in an ark, which is called the ark of the Adut. Now the question is, what exactly are we talking about that is inside the box? What is it that's inside? We know it's called the Adut, the testimony, but what is that and what is on it? So this is where speculation comes in. Look, a lot of people want to put a lot of things in the box. And a lot of people want to put a lot of things on those, see, I almost gave it away, on the testimony. We need to look closely and say, what does the Bible say? I want you to go with me to the book of 1 Kings, and this quite possibly is the only time that I will leave the Torah today. 1 Kings, I want you to go to chapter 8, 1 Kings 8. And I want to read to you verse 9. 1 Kings, verse 8, 9. There was nothing, let's do verse 8. And they drew out the poles so that the end of the poles were seen from the holy place before the sanctuary, though they were not seen outside, and they are there to this day. I want to take a pause for just a moment. A lot of people who are critical of biblical scholarship would propose that the book of Kings is written very, very late. In fact, they would oftentimes date this after the destruction of the temple. Now, let me tell you, in fact, some of the scholars refer to these things as a pious fraud, that it's fake, that it's bogus. If you're going to produce a fraud, would you say that something is there to this day if you know it's been destroyed? You get my point? In other words, if it's not there anymore, somebody picks it up and they go, it's not there. So this was written at a time when this was the fact. There were still poles. You could see the poles. He's going, you can go look at them right now. All right, just a little sidebar, by the way. It says in verse 9, there was nothing in the ark save the 2 tablets of stone which Moses put there at Horeb when Jehovah made a covenant with the children of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt. According to this, 1 Kings 8, 9, the only thing in the testimony are the 2 tablets that Moses put there. Now, if this holds up, the testimony that we're talking about is also known as 2 tablets. They were placed in there by Moses. Now, guess what else is in that ark? Nothing. Nothing else is in the ark. Again, I'm going to show you as we work through this, a lot of people want to put all sorts of things in the ark. They want to put all sorts of things. But all we know, according to the text of the Bible, is that 2 tablets that Moses put there are there. Now, the book of Hebrews, chapter 9 and verse 4, if you're taking notes, says that there's a golden urn of manna, and there's a rod of Aaron is in there, and that there's the 2 tablets. Well, what does 1 Kings 8, 9 say? By the way, it's also in 2 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 10. Same verse. Says exactly the same. The only thing in there are 2 tablets. So I want to dig a little bit deeper. The phrase, the 2 tablets, because we still don't know what's on the 2 tablets, right? We just know that what is known as the edut, or the testimony, is also known as the 2 tablets. So I want you to go with me now as we journey further into the text to dig a little bit deeper, and I want to study a little bit more so that we can find out more information. Does the Bible, for instance, tell us anything else about them? Do we know how big they are? I mean, we know that they're made of stone, but do we know what was written on them? Again, I'm only interested in what the Bible says is written on these tablets. Look, a lot of ideas out there. A lot of people have studied a lot of things, and they've come up with all sorts of interesting theories as to what's written on it. But I want to know what the Bible says. So go with me to the book of Exodus, chapter 31, please. Exodus 31. I love my job, by the way. This is my favorite thing to do, is talk about the Bible. Exodus 31, verse 18. Here we go. And he, by the way, the he is Jehovah, gave to Moses, when he had made an end of speaking to him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone written with the finger of God. 2 tablets of the edut. Remember, the only thing in the ark are the 2 tablets. So what's on them? Well, here's what we know. 2 tablets of the edut. They're made of stone, and the writing is God's finger. Now, guess what we don't know? At this point, biblically, we don't know what the finger of God wrote. All we know is that we have 2 stone tablets. They are written with the finger of God, and they're to be stored in the ark. But it's still a mystery as to what's on them. Go with me to Exodus 32. Exodus 32, verse 15. And Moses turned and went down from the mountain, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in his hand, tablets written on both their sides. On the one side and on the other were they written. And the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved upon the tablets. Okay, so now we know that the 2 tablets of the testimony. Now, if we're real picky with our text, and I like to be picky, I want to read what it reads, and I don't want to add to it, right? Remember, don't add to or take away. Remember that little rule? A lot of people don't play by that rule. I do. It's from Jehovah. Don't add to or take away from. But it says that he goes down, he's got the tablets, plural, in his hand, singular. Now, you might have seen, I don't remember, does Charlton Heston pack these big things in both hands, or how does he do it? I mean, they're like big, I think he's got them like this, because it's big old tablet, because he writes it in a 72 font. You know, like God writes real big. And maybe he did. I don't know. I'm just saying. What it says is he's got the 2 tablets in his hand. Now, I've jokingly held up my iPad and said, you know, here's a tablet. You know, there's a picture that James and I took together with the 2 tablets. What's to say? What's to say? We know there's stone. What kind of stone? I mean, was it translucent? You know, was it just like, I mean, people want to picture this primitive, you know, chiseled out. We're talking about the creator of the universe, the one who designed a dragonfly. Do we not think that this can be some sort of, okay, I don't want to go too, some of y'all already think I'm crazy, but this is like a little tablet. You know, I could put 2 of them in my hand and come down with it. All right. Tablets that are written on both sides, on the front and the back. Now, the Hebrew here is a little bit tricky, but when it talks about the front and the back, I want you to look at this. I'm not going to get into the technical aspects, but I will say, it goes on to say, literally, mizeh umizeh. Mizeh umizeh means from this and this. So it's almost like if I were to hold this and I'm trying to explain to you what the tablets were, which I am, I would say, look, it was written within and without. It was like mizeh umizeh. You get from this and from this. The tablets were, what is going on here? I would say the tablets were. My phone started talking back to me. I was about to say, that's a good class. Maybe I'll just watch that. So the idea is that mizeh umizeh, from this and from this, and then we get this, the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, engraved on the tablets. Engraved on the tablets. But here, what do they say? I mean, the question, we know what we know. We know that we have 2 tablets, and we know that they're written with the finger of God, and we know that they are placed inside the ark. We know that they can be carried in one hand by Moses, but we don't know yet what's written on them. You know, a lot of speculation out there as to what's written on them. But what does the Bible say? Now, I don't want people to jump ahead of me because some of you might be thinking of passages which deal with a second set of the commandments, as they're called, a second set of the testimony. Now, I'm going to get into that in another class, but some of you are going to think about verses that deal with something I'm not talking about. I'm talking about the original edut, the testimony. Now, in order to find out what was written on those stone tablets, do you know that we have to go to Deuteronomy? Deuteronomy is the only book that tells us what's written on it. I know some of you are going, First set of tablets. Only in Deuteronomy. Now, first things first, I want you to pay very close attention to this. Hopefully you've been paying attention to the whole thing. Of all the passages that I have quoted about the edut, the testimony, you want to notice something interesting? Not one time did I quote Deuteronomy. Nowhere, if you're taking notes, you might want to underline this, because I know you're going to want to check me. Nowhere in Deuteronomy does the word edut in reference to the two tablets occur. The word edut, and I'm talking about with a singular with a definite article, ha-edut, a designation for the two tablets as the edut doesn't appear in Deuteronomy. There's a reason for that. This is one of the things that got me back on this subject. I'm presently working on a project, and it deals with Deuteronomy. So this is what got me thinking about this again. Now, for those who are already checking in your Bible software, let me save you some time. Do it anyway. But Deuteronomy 4:45 and Deuteronomy 6:20, you're going to see the word edut. There, E-D-U-T is, or E-D-U-T-H in English. But the idea is that in these situations, it is not talking about what I've been talking about for the past 40 minutes. It means testimonies, but it doesn't mean the tablets, the two stone tablets. Now listen to this. In the book of Deuteronomy, we don't have the phrase Ohel Edut, the tent of the testimony. We don't have the phrase the Mishkan Edut, the tabernacle of the testimony. And we don't have the phrase Aron Edut, the ark of the testimony. In Deuteronomy, let me say this very carefully, we don't have mention of a tent of the testimony, a tabernacle of the testimony, nor do we have an ark of the testimony. Those phrases are not mentioned. My point? You got to wait for my project. But right now, Deuteronomy's first-person account. Moses is speaking in Deuteronomy, and he, Moses, is going to tell us what is written on those two tablets. Go with me to the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy 4, verse 12. And Jehovah spoke to you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the voice of the words, but you saw no form, only a voice. And he declared to you his covenant, which he commanded you to do, the 10 words, and he wrote them upon 2 tablets of stone. Now, Moses, first person, says that Jehovah declared his covenant to you, which he commanded you to do. Now, he's talking about a covenant that was spoken from the fire, and these are the things that you are to do, and then he qualifies it. It's called the 10 words. Now, in Hebrew, devarim can mean word, matter, thing. So these are 10 things. They're called the covenant. The covenant is 10 things. Now look, I know people who study covenants go, well, according to this ancient Near Eastern study, we know that covenants had this, and they also had other things attached, and there were stipulations to the covenant. Listen to me. Study this out biblically first. Other things can aid us in our understanding. I want to know what's on those stones. I want to know what Jehovah wrote. I can learn from other things, but I'm really interested in what Jehovah wrote on the rocks, right? He wrote these things, these 10 things, which are also called the covenant. He wrote these on 2 tablets of stone. They're called in English the 10 Commandments. Does your translation, you're all over the world so I can't hear you, but shake your head yes if that's what it says. Does your translation say the 10 Commandments? Some say differently, but most or many have 10 commandments right here. That's not what it says in Hebrew. The word commandment is never used. So the 10 commandments are not the 10 commandments. In fact, if you counted the quote-unquote commandments in the 10 commandments, you'd get more than 10. Do it. Bit of trivia. This is fun. You count them, get the answer, and then go to your family gathering. They're already mad at you because you eat funny foods and you have weird beliefs. But ask them how many commandments are in the 10 commandments. And use that to start your next family feud. It's always fun. I'm really joking. Don't ever do that. But it is fun. How many commandments are in the 10 commandments? What was written on the tablets? I'm only interested in what the Bible says. I want you to go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 19, verse 22 in English. Deuteronomy 5, 19 in Hebrew, 22 in English. And I'm going to demonstrate for you how a translation, which I have a lot of respect for, suddenly forgets Hebrew. The translator all of a sudden doesn't know Hebrew. Very interesting. But we're going to read it. These words Jehovah spoke to all your assembly in the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, the thick darkness, with a great voice which was not heard again. And he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and delivered them to me. You see that part that says, or did you hear that where I said, which was not heard again? In Hebrew, that says, Belo Yosaf, which means, and he didn't add. He didn't add. Now here, it implies that he spoke with a loud voice that was never heard again. Well, you could go, well, that's true. We never heard the voice again. Okay. But that's not what the text said. It says, here's the deal. There's a storm clouds and lightning, and it's this ominous blackness and a trumpet sounding. Jehovah's voice speaks 10 things, and he added no more. And he wrote those 10 things on 2 stone tablets, and he added no more. He doesn't have a short story from Reader's Digest. There's nothing else on the stones. He added no more. Belo Yosaf. Belo Yosaf. He did not add. The words that are written on those stone tablets, we just read them if we were following this narrative in Deuteronomy. We're going to get into this in another class. But if you go back to Deuteronomy 5, verse 6, I am Jehovah your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and it goes on. These 10 things, famously known as the 10 Commandments, which is not what the Bible calls them, but you get it. This is what's written on the stone tablets, and no more. Now, go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 9. Deuteronomy 9. And beginning in verse 9. When I was gone up into the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. They're called tablets of stone. They're called the 2 tablets. They're called the tablets of the covenant, which Jehovah made with you. I abode in the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I didn't eat bread nor drink water, and Jehovah delivered to me 2 tablets of stone written with the finger of God. and on them was written according to all the words which Jehovah spoke with you in the mountain out of the midst of the fire on the day of the assembly. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days and 40 nights that Jehovah gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tables of the covenant. Is it pretty simple to understand? When we follow it through and let the Bible speak for itself, we read that we have these 2 tablets. And on the 2 tablets is a covenant. The covenant that is written thereon is the covenant that was spoken from the midst of the fire. It was written on 2 stone tablets with the finger of God within and without, mizeu mizeu, on this side and on that side. And it was given to Moses to place in the ark. In Deuteronomy, there's a passage that says, refers to God gave an eshdat, a fire. Translated law, but this document is the covenant. It's the tablets of the covenant. You might say, which covenant? There are a lot of covenants in the Bible. Oh, well, that's easy. The covenant that was spoken from the midst of the fire on the day of assembly. Now, are there other episodes where Moses gets other laws and statutes and judgments and things of that? No, absolutely. But what goes in the box? The testimony. What's the testimony? The Adut. Even though Deuteronomy doesn't call it the Adut, it's still the 2 tablets. The 10 words. We call it the 10 words. 10 words go on these stone tablets and nothing else. It might be tempting to want to put other things on the tablets. Because we could think, well, I wish it would have had this, this, and this on there. Maybe it had these other elements of the law written on the stone tablets. Look, this doesn't do anything to take away other things that were written on scrolls that were later part of the covenant. None of that mattered. What I'm saying is, what is Jehovah's testimony? What did Jehovah write with his finger? Scripture is clear. It's not ambiguous. You don't need to try to figure it out. You just simply need to read. It's tempting to put other things on the stone tablets. It's also tempting to put other things in the box. Hebrews 9:4, there's a golden urn of manna, Aaron's rod that budded, the 10 words on 2 stone tablets, the words of the covenant. The Scripture's clear. We have, within this document, we have a record of what was written with the finger of God on stone tablets, mizeu mizeu, placed in a box called the box of the covenant, placed in a tabernacle known as the tabernacle of the testimony, placed in a tent known as the ohel of the testimony. We're going to continue this study next week. But until then, only put on the testimony what Jehovah wrote. Don't add to or take away, and only put in the box what Jehovah told Moses to put in the box. Shabbat Shalom. We'll take a few minutes and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about this in the dialogue.